Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday. It's January 20th, 2021. Well, we'll have to suffer in some areas, especially in Wyoming, with the wind today. But as we work our way into the end of the week and the weekend, we'll focus more on maybe some changing weather conditions as opposed to the wind, as we start to see some big changes take place out in the Pacific as the jet stream going through another readjustment phase, which is going to mean a more active weather pattern for the western United States. So it's going to be warmer and windy today. Then unsettled weather is coming this weekend, and next week's weather for the western states looks very much unsettled, more than it has in quite a while. Now, we're going to have high winds for some areas today. The high winds are going to be a lot more localized than they were with the big windstorm that happened last week at about this same time. Worst of the winds will be found across Montana, Wyoming, parts of western Nebraska, with I-80 and I-25 affected the most. A Pacific storm system is approaching this weekend with not only one, but two more systems coming early next week, which will mix things up for the western states as we go into the weekend and next week. Now, the western states are going to have better chances for precipitation in this pattern change. Like we have seen for most of the winter, it's going to be the mountains that fare the best. It's going to be harder to get it wet and white east of the divide. That's been a problem all winter. That is normally a problem in a La Nina. But we do see some snowpack improvement coming. And for some of the Great Basin states, the far western states, this will be the best chance of precipitation in a while. This is where we are today. We've got this upper level low just off the coast of Southern California with a strong jet stream wind riding on through, causing the strong winds in this area today. But what's going to unfold is all of this starts to get moving. This becomes part of the jet stream again and lifts north and east. And then this guy right here will start to carve out a trough in the western United States as we get into the weekend. Now, one thing that's going to be happening, we show you these oscillations that are signals, long-term signals that tend to show us if we should be turning colder, warmer, or drier, or wetter. It's a big battle that's going to be taking place here over the next 2 weeks. And when you get into these big battle of air masses, you can have a lot of weather. First of all, we're looking here at the Arctic Oscillation. The Arctic Oscillation is in a negative phase all the way into the first week of February. That is a cold, more stormy signal for North America. When we look at the North Atlantic Oscillation, we have told you many times that when the North Atlantic Oscillation is negative, which it is for almost the entire next 2 weeks here, that is a cold and more stormy signal. Now let's look at the Eastern Pacific Oscillation. Well, it is going into the positive phase right here, a couple of dips into the negative phase, but it goes into the positive phase at the same time. The North Atlantic Oscillation is negative, and the Arctic Oscillation here is negative. So what happens is this Eastern Pacific Oscillation is going to be throwing Pacific energy and Pacific air against the North Atlantic and especially the Arctic Oscillation coming into the north. So the Arctic Oscillation says, here comes the cold. The Eastern Pacific Oscillation says, no, wait a minute. We're going to come up and we're going to throw some Pacific air into the mix. And what happens is you get a battle. And when you get a battle like that, you get storms coming through, and you also have a lot of variability in the weather, and you have high variability in the computer modeling. Getting back to the wind, this is where the winds are going to be at their worst today, and it's in the usual areas, I-80 and I-25 across central and southeast and south central Wyoming, the ridge line of Rocky Mountain National Park getting hit by some really, really high winds there, and some strong winds up here into Montana. But unlike last week's windstorm, yeah, it's going to be windy here, but nothing like last week's system. And then actually, we don't see the wind as really being much of a problem for the rest of the week or the weekend, or really even into early next week. Now, this is what unfolds for the weekend. We have a trough coming into central California, a ridge building in behind it. So what we're going to see is we're going to see some Pacific energy and some Pacific moisture getting thrown out ahead of the system. There's going to be mountain snow showers developing as early as Friday across the Great Basin and the west and into the Rockies. As we go a little bit further on, this is for Tuesday. This is for Friday night into Saturday. The system will come on through for Friday night into Saturday, bringing wintry weather, mountain snow, and some more active weather. By Tuesday, we've got another low coming in behind it, settling into the Great Basin. Notice where the lows are setting up. They're setting up in the Great Basin. They're setting up west. They're not going down here, and they're not coming out into the plains here. They're kind of getting bottled up west of the divide. So if this pattern does unfold, what will happen is that Eastern Pacific Oscillation I talked about is forcing Pacific air in against the colder Arctic air that is right here that we've been talking about. This is some really cold air up here, but the Pacific system's pushing up against it. So we have a tug and forth. The Arctic air is trying to push in, but these Pacific systems are pushing in milder Pacific air. So you're going to hold back the Arctic air, at least in the western states. It's going to get more busy with more storms, but the Arctic air, again, is being held at bay by this really strong jet stream and active weather coming in off the Pacific. And what will tend to happen is you'll get stormy weather here in the west, the Great Basin, and some of that does get pushed east out on into the plains. And this is what it looks like over the next 10 days. Now you're seeing some colors here that you haven't seen in a while. Look at all the orange in California, even into Arizona, southwest Colorado. Look at Utah. Look at Nevada, up here into parts of eastern Oregon. All of a sudden, these areas which have been very dry are now going to be looking at getting some precipitation. Now what will tend to happen is that these systems will put out little vorts, what we call them, little pieces of upper level energy that will keep snow showers, and occasional, about every 2 days or so, it'll snow in the Colorado high country and the mountains of Wyoming. Notice though, east of the divide. East of the divide, yep, there's some snow, but this is just not a good pattern. When the lows get stuck back here in the Great Basin and don't want to come out into the plains, you're not going to get those upslope storms that are so good at making it snow on the Front Range and making it snow on the plains. But what you will see is the mountains in areas west of the divide this weekend and next week getting into the act with this low coming on in. Now, I talked about a battle, and it is going to be a battle of air masses between the Pacific and the Arctic wanting to push in. You're going to get a lot of model variability. So take all of this here with a grain of salt. There's likely going to be changeable weather forecasts over the next week to 10 days. But if you like the weather, it is certainly going to get more busy here for the last 10 days of January into early February. If we were to convert that to snow over the next 10 days, we have not seen anything like this in a while. So you can see that there's a goodly amount of Pacific moisture, at least the model wants to see it coming on in. And you can see it's getting in the mountains of Colorado and Wyoming as well, but really having a hard time getting east of the divide. If you look at the whole USA over the next 10 days, well, you can see it's a lot more snowy in the Great Lakes, New England. It's a lot more snowy up here, up into Canada. So we're going to see a more active pattern developing as we go through the last 10 days of January. Thanks for listening to Watching the Day Weather Podcast. We'll see you on Thursday.